Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this is chapter 13. We looked at chapter 12 last week, which is the end of the Bhakti Yoga section of the Bhagavad Gita. So the first 6 chapters are focused mostly on Karma Yoga. Second half, or second third of the Gita, from chapters 7 to 12, focuses on devotional service. In fact, the chapter 12 is called Bhakti Yoga, devotional service. It's such an amazing chapter. And now, from chapter 13 onwards, it's about Gyan Yoga. So this is where Arjuna asks many questions of Krishna, actually. Very interesting, tough questions, but Krishna, of course, answers them very easily. So what is the summary? Let's have a look at the summary of chapter 13. So the final 6 chapters focus on Gyan. Gyan means knowledge, so transcendental knowledge, which helps one become detached from materialistic aspirations and at the same time become attached to Krishna. It's not so easy to detach ourselves from a particular way of life unless we have another way of life, which is better than the previous life. So if we understand that actually attachment to the Lord is very important and very desirable and very enjoyable as well, then detachment from materialistic aspirations automatically this gets destroyed. Otherwise, if we're just trying to detach ourselves from our materialistic day-to-day life, very difficult to do so because we don't know any better. But if we know there's something far better, far superior, then it makes life a lot easier. Chapter 13 covers topics previously discussed, but explores them in a more analytical way. So the wise readers can take advantage of the logical presentation which is made by Krishna to strengthen our conviction and also deepen our understanding. So this knowledge is very useful, very important. Krishna gives amazing knowledge, and because Arjuna asks amazing questions. So there are 4 themes to this section, this chapter of the Gita. First, Arjuna asks Krishna to define 6 subject matters. He asks him to define Prakriti, and in essence, Prakriti is material nature, our world that we live in. He asks him to define Purush. What does Purush mean? Now, there's 2 Purushas in one sense. Of course, the ultimate Purush is Krishna, but we are also trying to become Purush, but actually it's a fallacy because we can never be the enjoyer. We're the enjoyed. We are actually part of the enjoyment of Krishna. We should understand that. But it's not that Krishna is selfish and he just wants to enjoy. He gives the devotee far more pleasure than he can ever gain from us. So this is part of the glory of the Lord. Kshetra, the field of activities, our body. And Kshetragyan, who is the knower of that field. And Krishna defines that as the soul. Jnana, what is knowledge and what is the process of understanding? And Jnanam, what is the object of knowledge? What are we supposed to do? What is our aim in learning? So that's the first theme, different questions, different answers. Then Krishna discusses what is knowledge. He focuses on knowledge, which is very important. And then he focuses on the nature of the Atma, the soul. And then he talks about this material nature and our interaction with it. So I wanted to stop there, but I think we're going to go through the first 7 verses. So I'd like to ask somebody, Hare Krishna Suti, very good. Fantastic. Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
Very good. Hare Krishna. So I'd like perhaps more the ladies this time to read the English translation. Last time we had a lot of men reading. So maybe the ladies can take over somewhat. Who'd like to volunteer? Any volunteers from the ladies' side? Maybe Lena, would you like to volunteer?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Shruti. You can kick
Thank
off.
you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
The first 7 verses, Prabhuji.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
First 7 verses, please.
Okay. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha. अथ त्रयोदशोऽध्यायः अर्जुन उवाच प्रकृतिं पुरुषं चैव क्षेत्रं क्षेत्रज्ञमेव च एतद्वेदितुम् इच्छामि ज्ञानं ज्ञेयं च केशव श्रीभगवान् उवाच इदं शरीरं कौन्तेय क्षेत्रमित्यभिधीयते एतद्यो वेत्ति तं प्राहुः क्षेत्रज्ञ इति तद्विदः
Arjun said, "Oh, my dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusa, the enjoyer, and the field and the knower of the field, and of knowledge and the object of knowledge." The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "This body, O son of Kunti, is called the field, and one who knows this body is called the knower of the field."
क्षेत्रज्ञं चापि मां विद्धि सर्वक्षेत्रेषु भारत क्षेत्रक्षेत्रज्ञयोर्ज्ञानं यत्तज्ज्ञानं मतं मम
O son of Bharata, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies, and to understand this body and its knower is called knowledge. That is my opinion.
तत्क्षेत्रं यच्च यादृक् च यद्विकारी यतश्च यत् स च यो यत्प्रभावश्च तत्समासेन मे शृणु
Now please hear my brief description of this field of activity and how it is continued, what its changes are, whence it is produced, who that knower of the field of activities is, and what his influences are.
ऋषिभिर्बहुधा गीतम् छन्दोभिर्विविधैः पृथक् ब्रह्मसूत्रपदैश्चैव हेतुमद्भिर्विनिश्चितैः
That knowledge of the field of activities and of the knower of activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings. It is especially presented in a Vedanta Sutra with all reasoning as to cause and effect.
महाभूतान्यहङ्कारो बुद्धिरव्यक्तमेव च इन्द्रियाणि दशैकं च पञ्चचेन्द्रियगोचराः इच्छा द्वेषः सुखं दुःखं सङ्घातश्चेतना धृतिः एतत् क्षेत्रं समासेन सविकारमुदाहृतम्
The five great elements, false ego, intelligence, the unmanifested, the 10 senses, and the mind, the 5 sense objects, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate, the life, symptoms and convictions, all these are considered in summary to be the field of activities and its interactions. Hare Krishna. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Reading it so nicely. Now, I hope you all didn't have a tough time at the office today. There's a lot to take in. There's a lot to take in here. Let's see what we can do to help understand a little bit better. Of course, Krishna explains it perfectly, but let me just see if I can share the screen. Okay. Great. So, summary of these 7 verses. Although Arjun is a transcendentalist, he's a knower. He knows everything, but he's playing the part of a ignorant person. So he can pose these questions for our benefit. And Arjun asks him to define the 6 subjects, right? Prakriti, nature; Purush, the enjoyer; Kshatriya, Kshetra, the field of the body; Kshetragyan, the knower of the body; Gyan, knowledge; and Gyanam, the object of knowledge. So there you go. Very briefly, pictorially, it's a little bit easier to sort of visualize it. So Prakriti, which is material nature; Purush, the enjoyer; Purush is the supreme Lord, in fact. Kshetram, the field of activity, that's the body. Kshetragyan, the knower of the body. So we are the knower of the body, but the Lord is the knower of everybody. Big difference. Jnanam, knowledge, process of getting knowledge. Jnanam, the object of knowledge. So these are the 6 questions. These subjects are key constitutes of Vedic philosophy, very important. And therefore Krishna spends the entire chapter defining and discussing them. His astute inquiries, Arjun's astute inquiries, creates the opportunity for Krishna to offer answers to life's most profound mysteries. And Krishna begins by defining Kshetra and Kshetragyan, the body and the knower of the body. Now, what's the lesson from this? We can learn about the various constitutions of our body so that we can understand how to control our desires and focus our attentions on the Lord. So what does this all mean? Now, Krishna, in that last 2 verses, 6 and 7, he described all the different elements, the components of the field of components of our body. So let's have a look at these components. There's the 5 great elements, right? That includes earth, the bones that we have; water. We're about 70-80% of our being, body is water. Fire, the fire is in the stomach, fire of digestion. The air, and a lot of air in our bodies. Ether, our thinking capacity. These are the 5 great elements. They're the gross elements. We can see them pretty much. And then there are 5 objects of the senses. What are these objects of the senses? We look at the form. This is an object. We like to see beautiful things. We like to hear sound, beautiful sound, music. We like to smell beautiful flowers. Taste them, nice prasad, nice food, and like to touch. So these are the 5 objects of the senses. This is what we try to satisfy day in, day out. And then there's the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, and then the 5 working senses. So what are the 5 knowledge acquiring senses? Eyes, we look with the eyes, we hear with the ears, smell with the nose, touch with the taste with the tongue, touch with the skin. So they're all connected. They're all connected. The objects are connected to the knowledge acquiring. They're directly related. And then we have the working senses, the hands, legs, the voice, anus, and the genitals. So that's the 15 different types of senses that we have. And then we have, so 15 plus 5 makes 20 in total. And then we have the mind. That's 21 of the elements. Then we have the intelligence. Now the mind is supposed to be in charge of the senses, and the intelligence is supposed to be in charge of the mind. In Kali Yuga, of course, the senses lead the way and the mind is not controlled. So it cannot control the senses. And then, so that's 21, 22, and then 23 is the false ego. We think we're the body. That's ahankar, false ego, not what we are. And then the final is the unmanifest. This is a little harder to understand, avyaktam. It's a little hard. And it's also known as the pradhan. Let's just quickly explain that. Material nature in its subtle stage is called pradhan. It is the undifferentiated sum total of material elements. This is really quite philosophical, and on a Friday night, maybe not the best subject to take on. Although there are undifferentiated, one can understand that total material elements are contained therein. When the total material elements are manifested by the interaction of the three modes of material nature, that's Sattvagun, Rajagun, Tamogun, the manifestation is called prakriti. So when the unmanifested is interacted with three gunas, then it becomes manifested. It's a condition of material nature immediately prior to its manifestation is called pradhan. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. The more important is to understand this. These are the field of activities. To understand that these senses and the sense objects are very interrelated. And if we're not careful, we get governed and controlled by these senses. So that's why Krishna is detailed exactly what the field of activity is. Okay, let's take the next 5 verses. Okay, should we?
Next 5 from
Yeah.
8, 9, 10 up to 12.
I'm just checking. Is
Oh, yeah.
8 to 12. Okay.
Yeah.
अमानित्वम् अदम्भित्वम् अहिंसा क्षान्तिरार्जवम् आचार्योपासनं शौचम् स्थैर्यमात्मविनिग्रहः इन्द्रियार्थेषु वैराग्यम् अनहङ्कार एव च जन्म मृत्युजरा व्याधि दुःखदोषानुदर्शनम् असक्तिरनभिष्वङ्गः पुत्रदारगृहादिषु नित्यं च समचित्तत्वम् इष्टानिष्टोपपत्तिषु मयि चानन्ययोगेन भक्तिरव्यभिचारिणी विविक्तदेशसेवित्वम् अरतिर्जनसंसदि अध्यात्मज्ञाननित्यत्वम् तत्त्वज्ञानार्थदर्शनम् एतज्ज्ञानमिति प्रोक्तम् अज्ञानं यदतोऽन्यथा.
So, who'd like to read? Maybe
this one?
Maybe Kaushalya. Kaushalya, would you like to read?
Okay, Prabhuji.
Good. You can start.
Humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, detachment, freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest. Even mindedness aimed pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unalloyed devotion to me, aspiring to live in a solitary place, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization, and philosophical search for the absolute truth. All these I declare to be knowledge, and besides this, whatever there may be is ignorance.
Mm.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you. So Jnanam, he's explained Jnanam, knowledge. What is knowledge? All these different aspects. It's a lot to take in one go. So we'll just focus in on one thing. Let's have a look. Okay. So these verses describe how Kshetra Gyan, the spirit soul. So Kshetra is body, Gyan, knower. So knower of this body is Atma, Jivatma, can disentangle himself from the body, Kshetra, by cultivating Gyan. So that's why Krishna has given these items. Since true knowledge is revealed within the heart of a deserving person, the real method of acquiring knowledge is the cultivation of divine qualities, of which humility is foremost. So the very first aspect of knowledge given was humility. Knowledge is not about information and memorization, but rather about exemplary personal character and practical behavior. One who nurtures a saintly disposition experiences a change of heart, which disentangles the eternal soul from its deep-rooted identification with the body, the temporary dress. So we are very attached to our bodies, our lives, our work, our families, our homes, our cars, etc. We need to become detached from that deeply rooted identification with the body. So how do we do it? Well, let's just take one aspect of all of those things that Krishna described as Gyan. Cultivate the quality of humility. Humility is very important. So how do we do this? What is humility? So let's take the spiritual context of humility. Humility is often mistaken to be simply some sort of meekness in behavior. Oh, I can't do it. I'm not very strong. I am not very intelligent. Yes, those things are okay, but that's still focusing on the I. I am not this, I am not that. And it's sort of also mixed in with being meek and humble, meek. But actually, humility is not weakness. Humility is great strength. What do I mean by that? Vaishnava humility is completely spiritual quality. It's not a material one. It comes from the understanding that one's real self is in relation to God. Real humility is the understanding that one is but an instrument of the Supreme Lord. That's all we are. That's humility. We can do anything. Humility doesn't mean weakness. Humility means great strength because we can act on behalf of the Lord as an instrument, if He so desires. So yes, I do not have any good qualities whatsoever. That's okay. On my own strength, I cannot accomplish anything independently. I am of no special significance in the vastness of creation. That's an absolute fact. My only qualification is the order of my Guru and Krishna. By their mercy, by their potency, I may be empowered to do anything as they wish. So I'll give you one example. There was a 70-year-old man. He had no valuables. He had no possessions except a trunk of books. He had no friends. He had not even necessarily good health. On his own, on the back of the order of his spiritual master. His spiritual master had ordered him, I want you to preach this Krishna consciousness to the West, to the Western speaking people. At that age of 70, he didn't board a flight. He went on a ship to America, the USA. He knew nobody on the other side, absolutely nobody. And he was on his own, in one sense, facing the whole of materialism. And yet, his humility was so strong because he considered himself simply an instrument in the hands of his spiritual master and Krishna. He, practically speaking, conquered the whole world. All he did was he was chant Hare Krishna in a park. That's all he did. And from that, over the next 11, 12 years, he built a network of 108 temples, had thousands of disciples, and translated over 60 books of spiritual significance, and traveled the world about 11 times around the world, preaching in almost every single country around the world, and established Hare Krishna as a household name. That's real humility. He wasn't thinking, I'm weak, I can't do this, I just stay where I am. He was in Vrindavan, the highest possible place in the spiritual world, within our world. But he left that out of humility, and he conquered the whole world out of humility. So humility isn't about our weaknesses. It's our connection with the Supreme Lord and understanding that we can do anything by the mercy of the Guru and Krishna. We simply have to be puppets in their hands. Srila Prabhupada defines humility as, and that person, by the way, is Srila Prabhupada. He's the founder Acharya of the Hare Krishnas. He defines humility as not hankering for the satisfaction of being honored by others. Thus, a Vaishnava does not endeavor to prove his or her worth to others or themselves. They simply endeavor to serve and please Krishna. This is the point. In the mood of real humility, one can act very boldly and confidently on one's personal behalf. A Vaishnava is very meek and tolerant. But when Krishna's service demands, a humble Vaishnava will do the needful in a complete mood of service. In mundane humility, the focus is on one's own inadequacies rather than on Krishna's mercy. I am in the center, not Krishna. That is the crucial distinction. So in mundane humility, you may see somebody, I'm not very intelligent, I'm not very clever, I'm not very strong, etc. But the focus is on just our own inadequacies. But that's beside the point. That doesn't even matter. As long as we fix ourselves in the service of the Lord through the Guru and through Krishna, then we can act boldly and confidently and still be considered to be humble because we're acting on behalf of the Lord. Greatest example is Hanuman. Hanuman was the greatest servant of Lord Ramachandra. And on behalf of the Lord, he could do any service he wanted. Yet at the same time, he was extremely humble. He would simply rely on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is humility. This is a really good one to cultivate. A really good quality. Okay. So the next, again, there's 7 verses, right? So let me stop share. You can stop share. And who'd like to read from Mataji? See, I can do it. Who'd like to read? Any volunteers?
I can read Prabhuji.
Yes, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so 13 to 19, please, Shruti.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Nyeyam yattat pravakshyami yat jnatvam ashnute anadimat param brahma na sattanna saduchyate.
I shall now explain the knowable, knowing which you will taste the eternal. Brahman, the spirit, beginningless and subordinate to me, lies beyond the cause and effect of this material world.
Sarvatah panipadam tat sarvatokshishiro mukham सर्वतः श्रुतिमल्लोके सर्वमावृत्य तिष्ठति.
Everywhere are his hands and legs, his eyes, heads, and faces, and he has ears everywhere. In this way, the supersoul exists, pervading everything.
सर्वेन्द्रियगुणाभासं सर्वेन्द्रियविवर्जितम् असक्तं सर्वभृच्चैव निर्गुणं गुणभोक्तृ च.
The supersoul is the original source of all senses, yet he is the one without senses. He is unattached, although he is the maintainer of all the living beings. He transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time, he is the master of all the modes of material nature.
बहिरन्तश्च भूतानाम् अचरं चरमेव च सूक्ष्मत्वात् तदविज्ञेयम् दूरस्थं चान्तिके च तत्.
The supreme truth exists outside and inside of all the living beings, the moving and the non moving. Because he is subtle, he is beyond the power of the material senses to see or to know. Although far, far away, he is also near to all.
अविभक्तं च भूतेषु विभक्तमिव च स्थितं भूतभर्तृ च तज्ज्ञेयं ग्रसिष्णुप्रभविष्णु च.
Although the supersoul appears to be divided among all beings, he is never divided. He is situated as one. Although he is the maintainer of every living entity, it is to be understood that he devours and develops all.
ज्योतिषाम् अपि तज्ज्योतिस्तमसः परम् उच्यते ज्ञानं ज्ञेयं ज्ञानगम्यं हृदि सर्वस्य विष्ठितम्.
He is the source of light in all luminous objects. He is beyond the darkness of matter and is unmanifested. He is knowledge. He is the object of knowledge and he is the goal of knowledge. He is situated in everyone's heart.
इति क्षेत्रं तथा ज्ञानं ज्ञेयं चोक्तं समासतः मद्भक्त एतद्विज्ञाय मद्भावायोपपद्यते.
Thus, the field of activities, knowledge, and the knowable have been summarily described by me. Only my devotees can understand this thoroughly and thus attain my nature.
Thank you so much. Very good.
Prabhuji.
Malini, right?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So this, especially this last one, he's explained just now the field of the body. That was the first 7 verses. Then he explained knowledge, next 5 verses, and then now he's explained the knowable. So and he's saying also only my devotees can understand this thoroughly. So we got to become his devotee. Then we understand this. Okay. So let's give a summary of this one. So having described the Kshetra Jnanam, now Krishna describes Gyanam, which is the object of knowledge. The purpose of knowledge is to realize the soul and the super soul, who are eternally individual, but at the same time, very intimately connected. So we are connected to the super soul. We're not the super soul. That's important to understand. It is a prerogative of the soul to understand the super soul. But the super soul is sometimes described as avigyanam, unknowable. So how do you reconcile this? Well, the empirical researchers who try to fathom the supreme using mundane knowledge or logic and material sense perception, they're always going to be baffled because the super soul will remain unknowable to them. But those who approach the subject matter of the super soul with the proper attitude to be ready and willing to gain insight through the eyes of the gurus, they can understand the super soul, the object of all knowledge. So what's the difference between the soul and the super soul? Let's understand this. If we can understand this difference between the soul and the super soul, then we will have a better chance of understanding who is God and who we are. So let's have a look. What's the differences? They're both knowers. They're both Kshetragyans. But there's a limit on the soul, and there's no limit on the super soul. The soul, they are living entities. They're known as Jivatma. Super soul is known as Paramatma. Param means topmost Atma. What's the size of the soul? Very little. Our size, who we really are, spirit soul, is 1/10,000, the size of a tip of a hair. So you take a tip of a hair, chop it up into 10,000 pieces. That's our size, very small. What's the size of the super soul? Infinite, huge. He's everywhere. What's the cognizance of one's own body? We can know our body, even that very limitedly. Do we know how our hair grows? No. Do we know how we digest our food? No. It just happens, right? We eat, go to sleep, it's digested. So we might be a knower, but to a limited degree, even of our own body. But God, He's the knower of everyone and everything. Super knower. The soul is a secondary proprietor of one's body. Just like the citizen is the proprietor of one land. But the land will be there after the citizen is gone. The body, in a different form, will always be there. Prakriti will always be there. But the soul will be traveling all over the place, depending on its karma. In terms of the super soul, he is the supreme proprietor of all the bodies. Proprietor. He is the king of all the lands. Right? The soul is a secondary controller of the senses, just like the citizens are the secondary controller of activities. So we are controlled, in fact, by the senses, unfortunately. Whereas the super soul, he is the controller of the senses. He's known as Rishikesh. He's the king of the original, like the king is the original controller of all activities. Soul is fallible. We can fall down. Super soul is infallible. The soul is a subordinate, loving servant. And the super soul is a loving master. The soul, there are many, many, many souls, unlimited. The super soul, there's only one. Although he seems divided into so many, because he's with everybody, he seems divided, but he's not. He's actually one. So this is a huge difference between the soul and the super soul. Sometimes in Vedic philosophy, some people try to justify that the soul can become the super soul. It's not possible. They're two separate entities. They're similar. The soul is spiritual. The super soul is spiritual. But we are tiny. The super soul is huge. That's the difference.
Give it a fire example.
Sorry?
Fire example. Example of fire.
Oh yeah. The example is that of a fire. If you get a big fire and sparks come out of that fire, we're like that spark coming out of the fire. And the fire is like the super soul. So in the next, hang on a sec, there's quite a few verses. So 20 to 42, so 23 verses now we're going to do in one go. And yeah, 2-3 people maybe can read. Any volunteers?
Yes, Prabhu, I don't mind.
Oh, yeah, but you've done already. We can give
Yes.
another chance. Thank you. What about Jyoti or is Manish, is Monica there, or you can read even?
Naviji, I'm happy to read the translation.
Okay. So maybe you can do 10 and then somebody else can do the rest. Okay. Thank you, Shruti.
Yes, Prabhuji. Prakritim purusham chaiva vidyanadi ubhavapi vikaramscha gunamschaiva vidhi prakriti sambhavan.
Material nature and the living entities should be understood to be beginningless. Their transformations and the modes of matter are products of material nature.
Karya karana kartrutve hetu prakritir uchyate purusha sukha dukkhanam bhoktritve hetur uchyate.
Nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects, whereas the living entity is the cause of the various sufferings and enjoyments in this world.
Purusha prakristho hi bhunte prakritijan gunan karanam guna sangosya sadasadyoni janmasu.
The living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus, he meets with good and evil among various species.
Upadrashtanumanta cha bharta bhokta maheshwarah paramatmeti chapyukto dehesmin purushah parah.
Yet, in his body, there is another, a transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the supreme proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, and who is known as the super soul.
Ya evam vetti purusham prakritim cha gunai sah sarvatha vartamanopi na sabhuyo bhijayate.
One who understands this philosophy concerning material nature, the living entity, and the interaction of the modes of nature is sure to attain liberation. He will not take birth here again, regardless of his present position.
ध्यानेनात्मनि पश्यन्ति केचिद् आत्मानम् आत्मना अन्ये साङ्ख्येन योगेन कर्मयोगेन चापरे.
Some perceive the supersoul within themselves through meditation, others through the cultivation of knowledge, and still others through working without fruitive desires.
अन्ये त्वेवमजानन्तः श्रुत्वान्येभ्य उपासते तेऽपि चातितरन्त्येव मृत्युं श्रुतिपरायणाः.
Again, there are those who, although not conversant in spiritual knowledge, begin to worship the Supreme Person upon hearing about him from others. Because of their tendency to hear from authorities, they also transcend the path of birth and death.
यावत् सञ्जायते किञ्चित् सत्त्वं स्थावरजङ्गमम् क्षेत्रक्षेत्रज्ञसंयोगात् तद्विद्धि भरतर्षभ.
O chief of the Bharatas, now that whatever you see in existence, both the moving and the non-moving, is only a combination of the field of activities and the knower of the field.
समं सर्वेषु भूतेषु तिष्ठन्तं परमेश्वरं विनश्यत्स्व विनश्यन्तं यः पश्यति स पश्यति.
One who sees the supersoul accompanying the individual soul in all bodies, and who understands that neither the soul nor the supersoul within the destructible body is ever destroyed, actually sees.
समं पश्यन् हि सर्वत्र समवस्थितम् ईश्वरं न हि नस्त्यात्मनात्मानं ततो याति परां गतिम्.
One who sees the supersoul equally present everywhere, in every living being, does not degrade himself by his mind. Thus, he approaches the transcendental destination.
प्रकृत्यैव च कर्माणि क्रियमाणानि सर्वशः यः पश्यति तथात्मानम् अकर्तारं स पश्यति.
One who can see that all activities are performed by the body, which is created of material nature, and sees that the self does nothing, actually sees.
यदा भूतपृथक् भावम् एकस्थम् अनुपश्यति तत एव च विस्तारम् ब्रह्म सम्पद्यते तदा.
When a sensible man ceases to see different identities due to different material bodies, and he sees how beings are expanded everywhere, he attains to the Brahma conception.
अनादित्वान् निर्गुणत्वात् परमात्मायम् अव्ययः शरीरस्थोऽपि कौन्तेय न करोति न लिप्यते.
Those with the vision of eternity can see that the imperishable soul is transcendental, eternal, and beyond the modes of nature. Despite contact with the material body, O Arjun, the soul neither does anything nor is entangled.
यथा सर्वगतं सौक्ष्म्याद् आकाशं नोपलिप्यते सर्वत्रावस्थितो देहे तथात्मानोपलिप्यते.
The sky, due to its subtle nature, does not mix with anything, although it is all-pervading. Similarly, the soul situated in Brahma vision does not mix with the body, though situated in that body.
यथा प्रकाशयत्येकः कृत्स्नं लोकम् इमं रविः क्षेत्रं क्षेत्री तथा कृत्स्नं प्रकाशयति भारत.
O son of Bharat, the sun alone illuminates all this universe. So does the living entity, one within the body, illuminate the entire body by consciousness.
क्षेत्र क्षेत्रज्ञयोरेवम् अन्तरं ज्ञानचक्षुषा भूत प्रकृतिमोक्षं च ये विदुर्यान्ति ते परम्.
Those who see with eyes of knowledge the difference between the body and the knower of the body, and can also understand the process of liberation from bondage in material nature, attain to the supreme goal.
ॐ तत्सत् इति श्रीमद्भगवद्गीतासु उपनिषत्सु ब्रह्मविद्यायां योगशास्त्रे श्रीकृष्णार्जुनसंवादे क्षेत्रक्षेत्रज्ञविभागयोगो नाम त्रयोदशोऽध्यायः। हरे कृष्ण।
Yeah, thank you so much, Shruti. Beautifully recited as always. Thank you.
हरे
So,
कृष्ण।
Hare Krishna. So this chapter concludes with the final two subject matters, the Prakriti, material nature, and the Purush, and how the conditioned soul tries to control and enjoy Prakriti. And that's a huge problem because the spirit soul is spiritual, but yet it's trying to control and enjoy something which is temporary. It doesn't quite blend together. It is this enjoying spirit that binds him to this material world. And hence why we're always lamenting, because we can never hold on to anything. No matter how much wealth or possessions we have, there's something called death, which is quite final. It will destroy any connection that we have with Prakriti. That's why Prakriti is temporary and it doesn't coincide with the eternity of the soul. And hence why the soul can never be happy in the material world because of its temporary nature. The super soul, however, is the actual enjoyer, Purush, and everything material nature and the souls ultimately are for his enjoyment. It's just like pouring water over the root of a tree. It will energize the whole tree, the trunks, the branches, the twigs, the flowers. Similarly, worshipping the Supreme Lord or serving the Supreme Lord automatically brings satisfaction to everybody, including ourselves. Just like watering the root of the tree nourishes the whole tree. Worshipping the Supreme Lord will satisfy the whole world. So the lesson, really critical one in this part of the Bhagavad Gita, is by practicing bhakti, we try to elevate our consciousness. Now, these senses of ours are like these wild animals, out of control, right? The eyes, the nose, the ears, touch, and sound. And the mind are trying to control these senses. They're the reins, right? But in this age of Kali Yuga, our senses are so out of control. The mind is struggling to be controlling these senses. And the intelligence is supposed to control the mind. And because we're not able to do that, the soul, looking a little bit terrified in this chariot. So the idea is that we try to perform bhakti. And what is bhakti? It is simple. Simply connect ourselves to God through chanting his names, reading about him, speaking about him. Otherwise, if we're not careful, we may not be able to elevate our consciousness in this life. And what is the consequence of that? If our consciousness is that of a tree, for example, that we have a beautiful body, so we like to show it off. That's our consciousness, that's our activities, that's our desire. Three things: desire, activity, that's karma, and consciousness, our way of thinking. If they coincide, we could get the body of a tree. Somebody who likes to sleep a lot, that's their activity, that's their consciousness, that's their desire. They want to sleep. Maybe in the next life, God will give them a body of a bear, because that's how they're behaving. That's what they'll get. Mother Nature is perfect in terms of coordinating what we desire and what we get. If somebody likes to eat a lot, no matter what it is, tasty or untasty or fresh or not so fresh, their consciousness might be that of a pig. That's what they'll get in their next life. If somebody likes to eat raw meat, perhaps they'll get a body of a tiger. So the idea is we elevate our consciousness from our animalistic consciousness to minimum human consciousness, but actually even transcend the human consciousness and become God conscious. That's really where we want to be. And how we can do that is through bhakti, through associating with like-minded devotees who also want to elevate their consciousness so that they can come to the platform of God consciousness. And at that level, one will attain the spiritual world. If we are fully God conscious, we would attain the spiritual world. If we are conscious of the devatas, those who are still in the material world, like Lord Brahma, Lord Indra, if that's our level of our consciousness, we may go to heaven. But heaven is not outside of this material world, it's within the material world. So we would remain in this world, although in heaven. But when our good karma is finished, we come back to earth and start all over again. So we have a great opportunity in this very life, in the body that we have now. We can try our very best to become God conscious through reading Bhagavad Gita, through chanting Hare Krishna, through coming to the temple, being in the temple, through associating with like-minded devotees. We can elevate our consciousness to the state where it becomes God conscious, and then we can attain the spiritual world. So I wanted to stop there and wanted to ask if anybody has any questions or any comments they'd like to make. Please do feel free to do so.
Naviji, Manish
Yes,
here.
Manish, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I have a question about God and its servant.
Yes.
Why is it that we are termed as servants and not as friends? Or
Very good. Very good. Excellent question. In fact, there's 5 relationships with God. One is a neutral relationship where you're just enjoying watching the Lord and his activities. Second is servant. Third is friend, like you said, like Arjun was his friend. Fourth, can't count. Fourth is like a parent looking after the Lord. Of course, Lord looks after us, but looking after him. Yashoda Mai, Nanda Maharaj. And the fifth, the topmost, is regarded to be his lover, like the gopis, Radha Rani. So why are we saying servant? Because ultimately there's only one Purush, Supreme Lord. And everybody else is his servant. But there's a distinction. In this world, the connotations given to servant are negative. You are subordinate. Servant is subordinate to the master. But this is where, in the spiritual kingdom, it's different. The subordinate actually controls the master. How is that so? How can that be possible? So, have you seen the picture of Mother Yashoda holding a stick and running after Krishna? Have you seen that, Manish?
yes.
Who's the master and who's the servant?
I think it's still the Lord Krishna is still the master. It's his Leela as you describe it.
Yeah, but he's the one running away, right? She's got the stick.
He's scared.
He's scared. You're right. Ultimately, he's still the master, but he puts himself under the control of his devotees. This is the point. In the spiritual world, the servant is considered higher than the master. The reason being, the master cannot repay the debt of the servant. The servant's mood is, I want to serve you, my Lord. And the master, he will say, okay, but what can I do for you? And the servant will say, nothing. I don't want anything from you. I just want to serve you. And there's this transcendental competition between the two, where Krishna is saying, I want to serve you. And the servant is saying, no, I'm going to serve you. You can't serve me. You're the master. Krishna becomes indebted to that servant to the extent where he puts himself under the control of that servant. And the example is of Radha or the gopis. Krishna was so indebted to their service, which was completely unmotivated, completely they just wanted to please Krishna. They didn't want anything from him. To such an extent where Krishna could not find any way to repay his debt to the devotees. And he had to leave Vrindavan because he couldn't repay that debt. So the connotation of servant in the spiritual world is opposite to the connotations that are given to it in the material world. So it's not seen as a subordinate position. It's actually by the Lord himself. He submits himself to his servants. Does that make sense, Manish?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Naviji. That's a very good explanation and a very good perspective of looking at things. Goes back to the same philosophical idea of half full glass or half empty glass.
Right. In fact, we were just discussing in this afternoon that how the devotee, even he may be under distress, may have some reverses in his life, but he never blames the Lord, but he never also asks the Lord for anything. So he accepts those reverses as his own bad karma and the mercy of the Lord for sanctioning that, because the Lord will never do anything against the devotee or anybody, in fact. So if something is going wrong in our life, it's our own fault, but it's also sanctioned by the Lord. And the Lord won't sanction it unless it's good for us. So that's a really good understanding to have. So in that mood, even if something is going wrong in our life, we never ask the Lord, please correct this wrong. No. The only thing we ask the Lord is one thing. My Lord, how can I serve you? I want to serve you. Even we may have very difficult circumstances where we can't even render any service, but still the mood is, I want to serve you, my Lord. Let me do something for you, please. And that mood, that completely conquers the Lord. And that's not our intention, to conquer the Lord, but we want to please and satisfy, serve the Lord. And that's why we don't ask him for anything. He often thinks the Lord in Dwarka, we were just discussing this afternoon, in Dwarka, he living there, but he's not really enjoying, because everybody's there to ask him for something. I want, wealth, or I want progeny, I want this or that. But he's always thinking about the Brijabasis, those who are living in Vrindavan, the gopis. They never wanted anything from him. They would simply do everything to please him. And he would say to them, he would call out to them and say, where are you? I want to be with you, because everybody here is just holding me as a prisoner. They just want me to satisfy their desires. And when I satisfy their desires, they got so many more desires that they want me to satisfy. So we shouldn't be one of those guys that one after the other, God should satisfy our desires. No, we should simply be trying to satisfy him, his desires. I want to serve you, my Lord. What can I do for you? It's a nice mood to have. Sorry, I went on a bit.
No, all right. So, Nabiji, on this thing about desire.
Yes.
Right. Now, not to have a desire for moksha, is that also,
Yeah.
should one have should not even have a desire for moksha then?
Brilliant. You're really sharp, Manish. Yeah, even that. In the devotee, he says to Krishna, you can send me to hell. Just don't let me forget you. Just let me serve you wherever I am. He doesn't even desire moksha. Even beyond moksha, there's 5 liberations. One is moksha, merging with God, which is really a devotee will never desire that. But there's 4 other types. One can get the same type of body as the Lord, 4 hands, etc. One can get direct association, one-on-one with the Lord. What is the other? There's another 2. Can't remember the other 2. But the devotee doesn't even desire that. Not even that. The Lord will give, but the devotee is, no, I just want to, let me just do something for you. Let me just love you. Let me just please you. That's all. They don't want anything for themselves. Absolutely nothing.
That's quite interesting, because how do you get rid of desire? So even the desire to please the Lord is a desire.
It's a desire. But that's a spiritual desire. That's fine. The key desires to try to control are the material desires. I want wealth. I want a big family. I want a lot of possessions. Those gross desires, if we don't get rid of them in this life, they'll continue into the next life, and the life after, and the life after. So we have to make a conscious effort to try to reduce our material desires. And how to do that? By making a conscious effort to please Krishna, have a desire to please Krishna. That will replace the desires for material gains.
So what we're saying is we could desire, but desire for the right things.
Yes. You can't stop the desire. It's always going to be there. You can never stop the desire. It's what we are. That's what the living entity is. But what one can do is purify that desire. It's like we can't stop acting, right? Arjun said to Krishna, I'm going to the forest. And Krishna said to him, what are you going to do in the forest? You're a warrior. Somebody says, I'm not going to give you charity. You're going to get your dhanush out and fire it at them. And I laugh at you at that time. You can't stop acting, Krishna says to Arjuna. Even Krishna says, I don't stop acting. If I did, the whole world would finish. So similarly, we can't stop desiring. It's integral part of us. Like heat is to fire. Wetness is to water. You can't get rid of it. But what you can do is direct it in the proper way, into a spiritual way. Direct it to the Supreme Lord. Have the desire to serve the Lord.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Naviji.
Thank you for your questions. Really, really powerful questions. Thank you. Good understanding as well. Anybody else? Surinder, anything
Prabhuji.
you'd like to share?
Yes, Prabhuji, I got
yes.
question.
Yes, Kaushali Maji.
If we ask Krishna for good health, also that is a desire. We shouldn't ask, is it?
Don't ask. No, don't ask from. I mean, at the end of the day, let's put it another way. It's better to ask Krishna. If you're going to ask anybody, ask Krishna. Yeah. But it's better not to ask him for anything. Everybody's asking him for everything, right? And he's got so much to do. And do we think that he doesn't know what our necessities are, our needs are? He knows everything. He knows we need good health to remember him. But we don't want to burden him. Why should we burden him? If that's our mood, like Prahlad's mood was, he didn't care his father was trying to kill him. He didn't even realize. He was just meditating on God all the time. And what was God doing? Completely protecting him. Completely protecting, even without Prahlad asking.
Mm.
So we don't have to ask. God is our Father. He's our loving Father. Don't have to ask him for anything. He knows what we need. Instead, let's ask him for something which is very difficult to obtain. Please, let me love you. Let me, you do so much for me. Let me do something for you, my Lord. Isn't it?
Yes, Prabhuji.
But if you want to ask anybody, ask Krishna. Don't ask anybody else.
Okay, Prabhuji.
Don't ask the doctor.
No.
They can't do much.
Mm.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Kim Cho?
Sadhu che. Tame?
Alright, Che, thank you. Yeah, Hare Krishna. It's nice today. Explanation, very nice.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Any questions? So,
Nah, you gave my question answer already.
okay. Thank you. Thank you. for
Hare
taking
Krishna,
time.
everyone.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you.
Krishna. Surinder?
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Prabhu, Nitai Gaur Haribol. Very nice explanation of this chapter, Prabhu.
Thank you. Thank you so
Excellent.
much.
And this explanation can be summarized in form of a bhajan. It's the bhajan related to this chapter will be this song Manasa Deho Deho by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. As it goes, Manasa Deho Deho Jo Kichu Mora Arpilon Tuapade Nanda Kishore. Means like the different aspects of like this Prakriti, Purush, and etc. All these different aspects we can understand, and it is summarized severally, is expressed in this song that mind, body, and family, whatever may be mine, I have surrendered at your lotus feet, O useful son of Nanda. So, developing this offering and surrendering mood at the lotus feet of Nanda Maharaj, then we can be favorably disposed to practice bhakti with in a positive directions towards developing love of God. It also goes on to say that in good fortune or in bad, in life or death, all my difficulties have disappeared by choosing those feet of yours as my only shelter. Slay me or protect me as you wish, for you are the master of your eternal servant. It is your will that I have, if it is your will that I be born again, then may it be in the home of your devotee. And it goes on like that. May I be born again, even as a worm, as long as I may remain your devotee. I have no desire to be born as a Brahma, averse to you.
Very
Humble mood, yeah, humility, the humble expression. I yearn for the company of that devotee who is completely devoid of all desire for worldly enjoyment or liberation. So this is the concept of like we have to be free from the mood of enjoyment and moksha, liberation. To be free from that.
very
And
good.
father, mother, lover, son, lord, preceptor, and husband, you're everything to me. Means the all different relationships we can approach the Lord to serve Him, to please Him. And then Bhakti Vinod says, O Kanha, please hear me, O Lord of Radha, you're my life and soul. This in this mood of bhakti, I aspire and I thank you. I offer my dandavat pranam to you and all the Vaishnavas and I beg everybody for mercy and kripa to be able to practice Shuddha Bhakti. This way, this is my prayer and aspiration. Nitai Gaura.
Which song book is that from?
Manasa Deho Geho.
Okay, so we haven't sung that yet. We will do. We will do in the future.
I think Ananda Lila is saying we have sung already.
We've sung it. Okay. Okay.
I think it is.
Okay. Maybe you can just point it out to me.
No, Sharanagati song. Yes.
Sharanagati. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, we've sung that. Very good. Very nice, Bhajan. Thank you for reminding us. Huh?
Thank you. Thank you. Nitai Gaura.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Thank you very much. Ravi, anything you'd like to say or ask?
Okay for now, Prabhuji. Just
Good.
learning as we go. So yeah, keen to attend these sessions.
Good. And it makes sense? It's okay?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I've got Malini next to me, so she's been doing this from school. So she studied in Chinmaya and Chennai.
Oh, wow. Well done. Well done. Well done.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
my kind of guru in this as well. After you.
That takes a guts to admit. Well done. Very good. So Malini, do you know the Sanskrit? You can recite the Sanskrit as well?
A little bit, yes, Prabhuji. Yes, I read Sanskrit a bit. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Good. I may have a task for you. Very good. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Shruti. Anything you'd like to say? You're amazing, you are. We're going to miss you when you're not here.
Nothing, Prabhuji. Thanks as always. Thank you for the opportunity to chant the words of the Lord. It's a blessing. It's an honor, and I never ever want to miss out on this. I would like to be involved for as long as I can.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shruti. Amazing. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, everybody. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hey, Hare Krishna. How are you doing?